generally with what he does as a graphic designer, with his fonts and borders, and just generally about railroads and games. So you can go right ahead.
He comes up.
You might want to. Okay, yeah.
There we go. Okay, hello everybody. Many of you I do not know, but in case if we haven't been introduced, my name is Eric Ross. I am a second-year master's student in musicology here at the Jacob School of Music, and tonight I'm serving as an ambassador for Studio 346, which is the game company I'm a part of. We are currently working on our flagship title, which is going to be called Century of Steam. What we do is that we are a railroad simulator. There's plenty of railroad simulators out there, but we are seeking to make a wonderful confluence between both the actual simulation aspect and then also some more tycoonish aspects as well. So I was asked to provide information about what I specifically do before we talk about the music. And so I am just one of many people who work on this. We have about maybe 26, 27 people working on the game, if I remember correctly. And so we've got coders, we've got sound designers, we've got researchers, we've got photographers and whatnot, 3D modelers, 2D artists, and I am a 2D artist. Eventually I'm going to get to work on the soundtrack as well, hopefully, and I do a lot of historical research as well because we need something like this. So our idea of what we want to do is we want to recreate some railroading scenes from the past and let people play it in whatever manner that they wish. And so our game is not loosely, it's actually based from the time span of about 1869 to 1969. So the completion of the first transcontinental railroad in the United States to the first moon landing. That is the time frame which we are working with. And so for our first game, we are going to be doing stuff with narrow gauge, which are little tiny trains, and they're very cute. And so this is a good example of our aesthetics for the late 1800s, which is currently the era which we are specializing in. And we also want to go up to far later stuff, and here we have some pretty advanced equipment, all stuff built in the 1920s. That diesel over there was built in 1967 or something like that. So we just want to have something for everybody to be able to play with, and you'll be able to find a way to do things how you want. As far as my main contribution to the game, apart from being a historical researcher, I do graphic design, and so my job mainly is locomotive and rolling stock art. And so basically I look at photographs of what these machines are painted like, and I recreate them because I want to make it as historically accurate as possible. And so here we have one example of me just doing some pretty artwork up on the headlight of this particular engine. I've recreated it here as faithfully as I can. Still need to work on some shading here and there, but that's generally what I do.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I also do a whole bunch of fonts, and so the whole thing with our game is that we want it to be very customizable for what players want to do. And so some people are going to be content with recreating a historical railroad company that actually existed and using their stock how they wanted. But then there's a lot of other people who are like, I want to go off and create my own railroad, and I want to name my engines how I want to name the company things. And so what I do is I recreate the tools for you to be able to display that information, and so that is font work. And so what I do, of course, is I look at photographs again, and I get what I want, and then I recreate it as faithfully as I can. This is just one phrase. I have a fully typable alphabet for all of these, with accent characters as well for Spanish and Portuguese and French orthography as well, maybe a little bit of Swedish as well, and punctuations, numerals, everything you could think of, which you would probably need for something like this. And there are a lot of different fonts because there are tons of photos of these things, how they were painted, and I try to recreate them all. So this is just one example. Here's another example which is more complicated. You can see the actual font work used on the tender of this engine. This was not the easiest thing to recreate because of the drop shadows, but when it comes together, oh my gosh, it's just the best feeling in the world, because it just looks so pretty. And so another thing which I do, in addition to the smaller ornamental details and the font work, is I recreate all of the line work. A lot of our locomotives in the game are from one specific company, which was based in Pennsylvania, called the Baldwin Locomotive Works. And they had very clear standardized paint schemes so that they would paint on their engines. And so I recreate that. So here's an example of one engine. Notice the side detail on the tender. This is called the tender panel. And in addition to this specific engine and other photographs of engines painted in a very similar manner to this, I go and I recreate as many variants as I possibly can. And here are just some of them. And then we actually put them on the engines in the game, and they look pretty, and they're historically accurate, and I'm like, yes, this makes my heart very happy. And so there are a lot of different things which I want to do with paint, so I'm just going to show 3 of them here. This is Baldwin Style 1, which is this specific combination of line work. Then we've got Style 3, which is different, and we've got Style 9, which is even more different. And so that's just one very small little specific example of the type of customization which we want to have in the game. And so I think it would be good to go to the actual customization video, because we just actually posted this last night, I believe. No, I don't want a software update, go away. So here's a really neat video about just how many customizations are there. So this is for just one of our locomotives in the game. And also, I want to take this moment to turn up our volume. Because we do have a soundtrack, which we are currently creating. And so this is just an example of one of the pieces. Hopefully it's not going to blast our eardrums. So I just want to mention, we did a calculation. The calculation was how many different, for that one specific engine, how many different unique combinations can players reasonably set up their engine to make it, how they wanted it to look, accepting text and everything, because the text is going to change from each thing. All of those different variants which we saw in that video are a pretty small amount of the total number of different combinations you can do, because we calculated for that one engine 107.6 quadrillion unique combinations. We like player choice. Player choice is a very good thing. So now really on to the music. So what is railroad game music supposed to be like? Well, I had an interesting answer from a question which I asked some of my buddies who are working on the game with me. And so the question asked, so as far as orchestration goes, what were some main themes that you strove to include when composing and recording the music? What makes train-related music feel the right way? And so one of my people answered, it's largely simple key structure and the arrangements having the right instruments that put you in late 1800s Americana land. Though we went a little bit beyond that, because by the time that we end with our time frame of 1969, Led Zeppelin has just put out their first album. So we do have some classic rock fans in the group, so I would definitely expect to see a lot of cool arrangements like that. Another person answered to the same question, keeping to the roots, using the instruments that the railroad workers would have had with them to play around the campfire at the end of the day, and keeping to the tunes that they would have had in repertoire. And that last point is pretty interesting, because a lot of our new stuff has been recently composed. We were with a different railroad simulator for the past 2-3 years or so, but then we branched off and decided to do our own thing. We had created a soundtrack for that, and because we still have the ownership rights of that, because we made it, we're going to be using that as Volume 1 for our soundtrack. We're currently working on Volume 2, which is all completely newly composed stuff. Volume 3, we're thinking we want to do a giant set of Irish tunes. So these will be existing pieces which would have been around then and would have been heard across 1800s America at that point. So that's another aspect of history which we want to try and do. So as far as with railroad games, the gold standard for railroad soundtracks for the past 22 years, I think now, has been the soundtrack for Railroad Tycoon 3. And so this is a pretty old game, came out in 2001, 2002, something like that. And if I go to history, I will actually find it. No, I don't have history, okay. Let's see. What am I thinking? Okay. I just want to play a quick 2-minute piece. This is, from me, one of the best items from this particular soundtrack. And so we want to play it well, but we also want to pay reverence to this older game while updating it. And so I just want to show you where we have come from. So this is Don't Let Your Dead Go Down from the Railroad Tycoon 3 soundtrack. That is not it.
Oh dear.
Don't start there. Start there, please. Thank you. that is the vibe which we're going for, because there's just some quality about it which eludes words. So if I actually go to what we have been doing, so the first piece of music that we actually really composed, per se, for our new game is the main theme, which was used in the announcement trailer. I'm just gonna play the main theme. The announcement trailer is cool and all, but I just really want us to hear the main theme as it is. And so this is what's gonna greet you whenever you start up the game. And it was composed by my friends Mark and then Tom, who are wonderful musicians. They're two of our coders, and they just love doing music, and so this is what they came up with. A lot of the times they'll just sit in Discord and they'll just jam with each other until they find something that they like. They'll write it down and then they'll come back to it and expand it. So that's how our composition process has been going so far. It's very organic and I like that. So here's our main theme because this is cool.
75-cent bonus wins.
No, it's an unskippable ad. Stop.
I'm so sorry.
Shh. Why do you start there? That's weird.
Because that's what I thought last time.
I didn't do anything. So as we said, it's a lot of instruments that they would have had at hand. It's such a good riff. I love that. And I really love this example because it shows the full scope in time of what we want to do, because it starts out entirely acoustic, you've got mandolin, you've got guitar, you've got fiddle, and then it translates into electric guitar at the end of it, which I think is just so cool, that we show all the decades which we want to do in one song. Let's see, what's next?
This makes my southern heart happy.
Yes, it does too, yeah. I'm like, North Carolina, I'm not so far from you now. So then, just one last music example which I would like to show if I go to my friend Mark's channel on YouTube, because he is a prolific YouTuber in the Railfan sphere.
So last
Okay, shush.
So last time we talked about the recording process and how you track each instrument.
He's got all of these different videos, but I just want to quickly play a little bit of one of our other songs, because this is a actual live recording which you can watch in real time. This is a song called Top of the Mesa. from that, I think y'all can get a good idea of just how we do things. It's very organic, very intimate, and we love doing it like that. Before I get to our last video, I do want to go over some questions which I had asked Kayla to be able to field, and then after I'm done with everything, y'all can ask me any questions which I can, and I'll see if I can answer them. So the first question was, of course, we have a big love of steam whistles in the game because they're very melodious. I mean, all of them play musical chords of some variety, so they are basically steam-blown organ pipes, which is nice. So there was a question with the whistles, where do you get your sources, since they're based on historical sources, and could you use more modern equipment like air horns and whatnot, and how does that compute into the sound design? And so we all use recordings of real whistles. We go out in field and find them, record them, and we can use basically anything that you give us. I already answered the orchestration question. Here's two questions which I posed them. So, do you have a set-in-stone plan when you set out composing, as far as what genre, style you want to do, or does the song gain its character only during the composition process? And it's very much through the composition process is how these songs take shape. And then one point I do want to stress. So, question, how important is history to the project? What role can your game serve in dealing with extant historical artifacts and research? And my friend Mark replied to that with one word, very. And so I can answer that from my point of view as being one of the historical researchers on this project. It's very important for us to get everything right because one, it's a form of digital preservation because there's plenty of these sources which are just mildewing away in stuffy boxes inside of archives of some library and who knows where if they're not found and kept, people may very well lose track of them. The documents may be destroyed, and so as long as we can get a hand on them and then also be able to use them, we can not only save them, but we can also teach people how these things actually were. And so it is historical preservation, in a sense. And so the last thing I wanted to show you, which is pretty cool, I was asked to do a demonstration of the actual sound design in the game as it stands. So we just presented the game to the public for the first time last weekend at the National Narrow Gauge Convention in Denver, Colorado. It's this big group of rail buffs and people interested in trains, and so we showed it off. We had a demo version of the game put together by then for people to play with, and so I took the liberty of recording a video from a dev build for that. Well, actually, it's a demo build, so this would have been released to the public for them to just see. And so I've covered music, but I haven't covered like the sound in the game. So here we are. So this is just going through the start of the game. So then I hit the play demo button, and we have our loading screen. That's our mascot, Rico. He's very cute. We love him very much.
He just showed me last week. That's the damn cutest thing ever.
Yeah. Wonderful art by our friend Winds and Strings. And so here's our little disclaimer of it being a demo, and here's the actual game. Everything that we can make interactable is interactable. Such as the handbrakes on cars, doors, and whatnot. No stone left unturned. And so you can see some of my locomotive art has been used here.
Yay! This is so cool.
And so this is a locomotive from 1887. We love it when the air compressor moves like that. It's just the little touches, they just make everything. So this is in the cab of the engine. All sounds, of course, have been recorded from as close to a prototype as we can get. We have some cool smoke effects. If I really turn up the smoke, that will be actually implemented because that's part of actually maintaining a fire in the engine. We'll get to simulation like that later. This is the injector. The injector is how you put water into the boiler. And so when you start it a little bit, you can see an overflow pipe, that water comes out, and then when you really get it going, and then it would be putting water into the boiler. And it's very loud, too. These things are very loud. Watch me struggle to get up there. I shut off the injector and I started up the dynamo valve. Also, cab windows and doors and whatnot, everything that we can make move, we will make move. And then I just shut off the dynamo for a little bit because I want to actually go and show the light lighting up so that you can see at night. And so everything is smooth dynamic lighting. All this is done in the Unreal 5 game engine. So we are just using this. Very cool to learn. And so now I start making preparations to set off. So first things first, got to release the brakes. And then I just ogle the air compressor a little bit more because I like it. Then we actually set off. Everything which we want to do smooth as possible, we've made it done. And so here I just do a little pass by just to demonstrate things, especially with the Doppler effect. We love the Doppler effect. It's very neat. So that's the general gist of it. The video is far longer because I looked at other things, but that is basically how we do things. Do y'all have any questions?
So I noticed that the train was moving.
Mm-hmm.
Can the train just run off?
Would you like to see the last scene? Because I did a little bit of a thing. Also, so we have different whistles. We have over 60 of them in the game because we really like how things sound. And so you'll hear one of the other variations. So you can see that I have the switch set against. at sunrise, and the day-night cycle has been accelerated so that players during the demo could get a good sense of how things looked. We worked very hard on that to get it right. So you can derail.
I meant,
In much-
can the train like run off, or is there like something that like allows you to stop the train while you're not on it?
Oh, there is no way to stop it if you're not on it. So don't.
You should.
Yeah, because we want to have it where, I mean, you have a first-person view for most of the time, so you kind of got to be in it to make it go. So don't.
While you're in it, can you like switch the point of view?
We actually haven't really given much thought to that yet. We are thinking about that, but I have nothing really to say on that matter at this point. Yes.
So something that you said, Kavanya, where you said like when you turned on the water and it was really loud, and you said it was really loud in real life. Are there any things like that, details like that, either in the sound design or in just running a train itself, that you decided to go for comfort rather than historical accuracy? Like maybe making something slightly less grating, or making something slightly less annoying to do?
I would probably expect when we actually get to, there's these things on locomotives called pop-off valves, and what they do is that they are a safety pressure relief valve, because if you don't want a boiler to have more steam pressure than it can actually hold. So of course you need to be able to vent that. Those things are extremely loud, like you cannot hear anything around you. We're probably going to dim that down a little bit so that you can still, you can comfortably play this with headphones on in the dead of night without waking up your neighbor five blocks down. So, yeah, because it is that loud. I've heard them, it's oof. Other questions? Yes.
So you were talking about how you guys are planning to make a volume 2 of music, and then you have it just seems like you have a lot of music planned right now. And I was just listening to the demo, and I noticed there wasn't really that much, or there was no background music. Where do you guys plan to implement the music?
The music will be in the actual game. We decided to not do it in the demo version, which we put together for the National Narrow Gauge Convention, because we wanted players there who are mostly just really nuts and bolts train fans, people who may or may not really have an interest in music like we would. We decided to not have that in there just so that people could get like the best the experience of just running a train that they probably could, because that's what they're kind of there for. We will 100% have music in the actual game. You can of course turn it off if you want, but it will definitely be heard as you're just doing things.
Do you want to like prefer to make some kind of simulator or make a game? I mean that you want to make it as realistic as possible, or you want to design it to be fun, so it's like a game.
So that is something which we've been dealing with for a while. How do we balance making it a simulator as authentic as possible, but then also making it fun? Currently, for the time being, we have been focusing on getting some of the simulator aspects down. The actual gameplay is going to come far later. We're still hashing out like how things are going to work, like snowfall and stuff like that. The actual game, like, oh, I feel like I've accomplished something, that's going to come later. So I actually don't really know how that's going to plan out, but that was a very good question, so thank you for asking that.
When you were mentioning about the volumes 2 and 3, I was curious, since you were talking about like how the music is very based on what they would be using at the time. I'm curious if there's any plan for like vocals or anything like that. So it's just like different like folk songs that would have been used during those times as well.
Like dialect.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very good question. We, admittedly, I don't know what our actual stance on vocals is, because at this point I'm not really involved with the soundtrack. Eventually I could be there if they need like Irish flute or something like that. But that's really a question for the other people who are more on top of this, and they would answer it better, and I didn't ask them that.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. It was when you mentioned about the Irish folk songs is what really brought that to my mind about that, since there's many Irish folk songs, and like just folk songs in general, that they have that vocal usage, or just like only vocal a cappellas and stuff like that.
Yeah, gotcha.
Sure.
I'm curious, in your work as a historian on the project, do you run into any roadblocks or complications along the way, especially when you're implementing real life companies or properties, or like if you're looking for references from people that have documents of these things, do you ever run into anything when you're trying to retrieve that type of information, or people who don't want you to implement that stuff into your game or whatever?
So of course there's always going to be some amount of red tape when it comes to archives having something, but then they're like, oh, send us like $60 to make a scan of these materials which you want. So I mean, there's always that monetary aspect present. As far as copyright, which I think was one of the things which you touched on, there are some entities, whether it be companies or like logos or stuff like that, which we cannot legally use. And so our workaround is that we create these fake companies, which are sort of like them, but they are our own distinct flavor. So there is a way to do it. But usually we just try and check and see how it is.
Can you personalize the name and the like icon of the company?
Eventually that's something which we want to look into doing. We're not entirely sure how we want to go about that, whether like you can upload something like in an image creator to the game. We're thinking about that. That has not escaped our mind. Eventually we would like to have full customization like that, so we'll see what can be done.
Do you have a plan for like adaptive music in any way? So maybe when you're like in this demo, when you're just maintaining the engine, you're not necessarily going anywhere. You've got like a slightly more ambient track still coming from the roots of your colored sound palette and all of that. And then when the engine gets going and you're going through the big, wide open prairie landscapes, that's when, the full tunes kick in. Are you thinking of doing anything like adaptive like that? That kind of where the soundtrack changes depending on what the player's doing, action to action?
That is definitely possible. I don't think we have discussed like doing like anything related to the player actually doing stuff.
Okay.
But one thought which we have tossed around, but take this with a grain of salt because we haven't actually decided upon it yet. One thing which we have thought about is maybe having it tied to the day or night cycle. So we would have some songs reserved for night, and then some for day, and then some which can play at any time.
Yeah.
We thought about that. I know that for certain, but I don't know exactly what our exact position on that is going to be.
Do you have seasons, or do you have like weather system?
Weather, we have tested some things with, and they have looked promising. Seasons, we're not sure yet, so I'll get back to you on that.
Well, if that's all the questions, then Eric, thank you so much for coming by. As this was the main event. We're gonna just switch to have some Mario Kart up, and this will just be open for the rest of the night. So I hope you enjoyed the first of our lecture series. There will be more coming up.